Greetings, I'm Dev the developer.
And I'm Glitch.
Classes let you style groups of elements. The ID selector does the opposite. It targets exactly one element, a single element on the page with a unique identity. We covered fragment links in a previous video, and the ID attribute is what makes those work. In CSS, that same attribute becomes a targeting tool. The ID attribute works like the class attribute, except one rule. Every ID on a page must be unique. Only one element per document can carry a given ID. In CSS, you target that element using a hash sign followed by the ID name.
Okay, so ID is the pound or hash symbol. ID main header only matches one element because there is only one element with that ID on the page.
That is a defining characteristic. Classes describe categories. IDs identify individuals. One instance, one target. ID selectors have the highest specificity among the selectors we have covered so far. They beat class selectors, they beat type selectors. When multiple rules target the same element and declare the same property, the rule using the ID selector wins.
Wait, so even if the class selector appears later in the style sheet, the ID selector still wins?
Correct. Specificity beats source order. We will cover the exact calculations in the specificity lesson. For now, the hierarchy to know is inline styles beat ID selectors beat class selectors beat type selectors. Given how powerful they are, you might wonder why you would not just use ID selectors for everything. A few reasons. The uniqueness constraint limits reusability. You cannot apply an ID to multiple elements the way you can a class. And the high specificity means once you use one, overriding it later requires an equally specific or stronger rule.
So the power is also a liability. A style locked behind an ID is harder to override than the same style behind a class.
Exactly, which is why in practice, most developers reach for classes for styling and reserve IDs for things that genuinely need a unique identifier. Landmark sections on a page, fragment link targets, or hooks for JavaScript. One note on combining ID selectors with other selectors. You can write something like div ID contact or ID contact p. The first is redundant since IDs are unique. Specifying the element type adds nothing. The second can be useful, targeting only the paragraphs inside a specific landmark section. That said, you are already at high specificity, which can make overriding those rules more work later.
Wait, so writing the element type in front of the ID is valid but not helpful?
It adds unnecessary specificity without adding clarity. There is exactly one element with that ID. The type is redundant. Writing div ID contact is like saying the person named Michael who is a person.
So every element on the page has its own unique address. A single identifier that maps to exactly one node in the entire document tree. If you needed to locate and target a specific element with precision across any page in any document. I mean, that is just what IDs do for styling.
That is what an ID is, yes.
I find that very useful for completely standard web development purposes.
Open your HTML, find an element that deserves a unique identifier, add an ID attribute to it, and write a matching ID selector in your style sheet. Then check your specificity against any class rules already on that element and see who wins. Don't just watch it, do it.